You can add and manage quotes for your projects in PJM. Quotes are identified by category, group, and item, and can be entered as a specific type. Let's see how this works in the following demonstration. Click the Start Demo button on this page to watch the demo.
From here, I'm going to go straight into the quote. So here's the quote that I created ahead of time, and we'll talk about making some changes to it. So I'm going to edit the quote and open it up. So here is the category so we break a quote down into three sections, into the category, and then the groups within that category, and then the items that are inside of that group. So in this case, I have let me first start out at the beginning, which is the quote header, right? So all this information came over from the project itself. So when I hit new, add a new quote, it brought over the engineer and the salesperson, the estimator, and all this other information. It also gave me ability to make this a certain kind of quote within that project. And again, it can have its own status within that project. So we can actually see that this job actually got bought and it was marked as awarded automatically. So it can also do each line and say which lines got brought over, which lines didn't get brought over, so we can run some analysis on how much I quoted somebody to how much actually got converted to orders. And then each quote can you can have a master quote, and then you can have other quotes underneath it that you don't necessarily want to count when you do your statistics, because we're going to talk a little bit about that too. So going back to my original thought was the category is the building, right, or the lump, maybe it's the base bid or the alternate bid. So it breaks it down. So this is the top tier of it's almost like a group, and then groups become like product groups. In this case, it's going to be the load of the 2-footing insulation, right? And then we have the items that are inside that group. And each one of them have its own item number and its own information, and it's pretty easy to just start typing in what you want or adding what you want. But real quick before we go into that, let me go ahead and print this quote out so you see what I'm doing here. When I print a quote out, first of all, it allows me to just preview it. I could just look at it like it is, or I could do print project, and here's where I can actually pick and choose who I want to send this quote out to. I don't have to send it all to them. Maybe I only want to send it to ABC Supply and only Advanced Building and not the other two. So I would turn these two guys on. If I want to preview the quote, I'll hit the preview. I can say, who do I want this quote to look like it's coming from? So right now, it looks like it's coming from me, but I could make it come from the salesperson's email, which would be whoever owns Billy Jones. That's who it's going to look like it's coming from. Or if I want to do the quote salesperson, whoever's in the header of the quote, it would look like it's coming from. Or maybe we actually want it to come from the estimator email address. All right, so we can determine where it comes from. We can have different layouts of the quotes. So maybe you have multiple divisions that like their quotes looking a little different. So we're able to make different formats for each one of the types of quoting pieces that you have. We can do a quote description. Maybe we want to do a scope on top and turn off the pricing, or we can change it from quotation, right, or whatever we want it to say at the top. It automatically says quotation unless I make a change. And then we have the quote header and the quote footer. So the quote header is at the top of the quote, what it says, and you can actually go in and edit that header and change the verbiage if you wanted to add some more verbiage to it, or maybe you wanted to make sure that this is highlighted or bold or underlined, or maybe even want it to be a different color, right? You can change the color on it and do that kind of thing and save it, or add more detail to it. Maybe you wanted it 60 days and 30 days instead of 30 days. Right, so I can do the same thing with the quote footer. In the footer line, it's where the thank you is. And notice how it uses replacement fields. So this is where I was saying it's going to look like it came from the salesperson who owns that contact, or maybe you want it to come from the estimator. So you have all these different replacement fields that you can build in these templates. So these are all templates, and you can have multiple templates that you may want to use. So same thing with the email subject, same thing with the email letter. You might have different email letters that you want to choose from. And each person and each group of persons and each company can have their own defaults on what comes over. And of course you can do, some attachments. So if I wanted to put a cut sheet with it, or maybe there's a diagram that I wanted to send with a quote, it would put it here. Actually, let's do send it out. We'll send it to everyone, and I'll hit the print button. So that sends the quote out. Then it also opens up a preview, so we should be able to see that in the PDF. There we go. So there's my quotation. It actually puts who the customer is at this point, and then puts the customer's contact name here. It's supposed to be the contact name. I'm not sure why it didn't show up, but this should have said the name. Then we've got the project. There's the header of the project. Here's the building number 125 with a load 2 footing installation, and you'll notice how I can put item numbers or not put item numbers. I can put pricing or not put pricing. I can put subtotal pricing. So if I wanted to load the load 2 footing, I can put a pricing on there or not put pricing, right? Same thing with each one of these loads. And then I've got the total price at the bottom. And then we've got, thank you for the opportunity. The salesperson who owns that contact comes across the bottom. And we can put some verbiage here. And again, that's all part of your templates. And then we have the ability to have conditions of acceptance or terms and conditions that you may want to go out with each one of your quotes. We actually have one customer that helped us do a signature, an electronic signature. So you could have an electronic signature page on this and then have the customer sign it, sends it to the salesperson to get countersigned, and does the whole legal documentation type of thing.
In PJM, you can manage your items on a quote, remove items, add a group, add items one at a time, etc. Let's see how this works in the following demonstration. Click the Start Demo button on this page to watch the demo.
On this group, I don't want to print items. So each one of these groups, I can say, don't print items. Right, so then what it's going to do is it's going to build the quote without the item. I mean, there's a lot of flexibility. That's the beauty of it all, right? So depending on how you like to send it out most of the time, you can make the system do it for you. If I don't want to do that, and I don't want to print this price per. Now I'll print it. All right, so that's the one I just printed out. Notice how it has the subtotal. Now I just took away those subtotals. So here, this one will load up here in a second. Maybe we don't want this stuff on here, right? So we can clean that all up, and maybe we don't want a grand total, that kind of thing. I would like to have a summary page at the top. So before we get to, where we have all the items listed, but I want to list at the top of the quote that page that we just looked at, right? So I want the groups with a total, the groups with a total, groups with a total, and then break it all down behind it. So I can add items, one at a time. I can add a new group here. So if I was down here and I wanted to add a new group, I can hit the plus button. And maybe I want to pull in a group this time. And I'll say, what kind of group do I want? So I can have groups preloaded here, or I can put one in on the fly. I don't have to use one of these. The advantage of using one of these, though, is I can have it preloaded for me. So if I wanted to bring in this load Explore, bring it in, and then it will bring in the items sort of like a Chinese menu saying, what do I want to have on this, right? So, or I can change quantities. Maybe I don't want this guy, but I want these other 3, or, you could have 50 items here and pick and choose what you want. We can have them defaulted to off, and you turn on the ones you want and bring them in. And then once you do that, it brings it over. And it asks me, do I want to bring in the pricing that I have set up in my PJM system, or do I want to bring over current pricing of the ERP? So if I say, yes, I want to bring over current pricing, it's going to go out, search the warehouse that this particular order is from, and then bring over the current pricing. So when I brought that over, all it did was it updated the cost into the quote itself. And if it was different than what was in the ERP, it would mark every item as a special. It would try to order it separately if I did it that way. I'm going to go ahead and add a new, actually this guy here. If I click on this little warehouse guy, it'll go out and tell me every warehouse that it's in and what I have available, what my list price and what my cost is. So right now I only have it in the warehouse that I'm in, but if it was in warehouse 20, I could click on this line, it'll bring over that $22 cost, and then it will, if it was a different warehouse, it would make it a stock or a warehouse transfer at that point, a WT. Again, if it were to be released. Right now we're just talking about quotes. But if I wanted to bring over that quote from a different warehouse, I could do that. One thing I did want to show you too on these groups, maybe more for the direct ship type of stuff, is I can load up a group called Load for First Floor Framing and put a cost and a sell price on the group only, and then pull in all these items underneath it with no pricing and no costing and just quantities. So when it goes out to the ERP, it creates an item for this first floor framing, a non-stocked item, and then it creates a non-stocked item for each one of these items with no cost, no sell price. And it actually autofills 0.0001 into the ERP. The way that we've done these other groups, where you see the group, you'll see there's no lot. This will never ship, right, because there's nothing in here. But these items will ship, and it makes up that dollar amount. Okay, some other things I wanted to mention too. You could put full description in here into this group. So let's say, for instance, we don't necessarily want to show them all these items, but you can go into this group and you can open up this selection and just start typing. Put in, full description, cut and paste, whatever you want in there. It can be web addresses. You can change the font on this stuff. You can really make things pop a little bit, right? So that's a nice little feature to be able to give it full descriptions. And we have that same box for every item. So even though in the ERP you only have the 2 descriptions, or maybe you use extended description, but in the item setup that lives in PJM, you can actually modify that and add the colors, add the boldness, add whatever you need to it. And it doesn't affect what's in the ERP. Now, if you needed something to be on the ERP side of it, there's a note field where you can actually make a note. So it's either an internal note, or if it's not internal, that'll transfer over. Types can be used for like locations, like a tag number or something like that if you needed to use that. And we can hide fields and move fields around, move things in different order. In fact, if you look at, there's actually a designer tool that allows you to go in, and you can do this by user, by groups of users, or by the entire system, right? So we'll do it by user. And then it opens it up, and then you can move fields around and change them and add things. And maybe you want certain search fields, and that thing can all be done. So there's a lot of flexibility as far as what the layout looks. Okay, so let's so I did want to say, all right, so I send this quote out and it goes out to everyone, right? When I go out of it, there's my quote. You can see that I sent out this quote to Advanced Building on 6/10. That's the quote number went out, and that's who sent it out. So it shows what went out, what didn't go out. If I wanted to go in and let's say ring, 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 the guy from Advanced Building says I need to change something on it. If I open that quote back up again, I can create a revision. And then I can actually go and sweep down on each one of these groups. If I wanted to go to this group and I wanted to make a margin of 35% or 25%, I could sweep down and it'll change all that group to 25% and automatically fix my pricing for me. I can do the same thing at the category level. So I might have my base bid, and then I have an alternate bid that I can go into the category level, and maybe I want to change everything in that base bid to a 22% markup or gross margin. It'll go down and swing down and fix all my pricing for the job. You get to pick on what you want that margin based on. Right now we're using average cost in my demo, but we can do last cost, we can do replacement cost. You choose what your company wants to use, but it is at the company level.
You can manage jobs in PJM, add jobs, award jobs from a sales order, import quotes to a job, etc. Let's see how this works in the following demonstration. Click the Start Demo button on this page to watch the demo.
All right, so in this case, if this was a quick onesie-twosie type of quote that I wanted to go out to, I don't necessarily have to create a job. This little star right here will allow me to award to a sales order straight from here. Now, once you do that, you lose all the ability of tracking the job and what's been released and what hasn't been shipped. And I mean, you would have to do it through the ERP. But it allows me to just award what I want to, create a ship to for it, skipping the whole job side of it, right? Again, this would be for like an on-the-fly type of thing that's not necessarily a job, but you wanted to get one of these cool quotes out there. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and close this door. And so now you can see that I maintain every quote. So, you know, this guy might have got 0, 0, and this guy got 0, 1, this guy got 0, 2, right? So I can have multiple quotes. I can have multiple kinds of quotes. So I've got commercial quotes. Maybe you have, you know, phase 1, phase 2, or maybe I've created the job and awarded quote release number 1, but they come back and they want a quote on another floor, right? So I could go and create that third floor quote and then bring that into the job. So I can just keep adding quotes to these jobs as I build it. So let's just walk through the process of adding a job. So ring, 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 phone call comes in. ABC Supply has decided they want to buy this job, so I'll click the add button. And the first thing it's going to ask me is who is the customer. So I'll type in ABC, bring them in. Then it's going to ask me who is the project manager for ABC Supply. So I can either pick one of these guys that are already assigned to ABC Supply, or I can add a new one from scratch. But in this case, we know it's Larry Watson. And I can say what kind of job this is, again, for reporting or for sorting out. Maybe I want to see all my plan and specs together. Maybe I want to see all my onesie-twosie ones together, right? So I can decide what kind I'm doing. I'll do a plan and spec. And then it'll bring over the salesperson based on how I have the settings. Right now it's coming in from the salesperson. The warehouse comes in from the quote. If I need to change that, I can. That's the initiating warehouse. That's who's going to get the credit for this job. It also is where the GL posting is going to pull from if you choose. The estimated job cost and estimated job sales will fill in by themselves as we start creating customer purchase order numbers. So I've got a created date, so this is the date that it was booked. The start date is the date where I'm expecting the job to actually start, you know, actually getting teeth and starting to build. You can really use this for whatever you want. Maybe you put estimated start date or whatever you want, right? And this just gives you the ability to put a date in. It doesn't really do anything. It could be used for cash flow. If I know this isn't going to start for 6 months, I can say I want to see all my jobs that are starting past this date or within these date frames. So we'll leave it. The close date, you can also close the job too. At this point, we're not going to close the job because obviously we were building a job. And really all that does by putting a date in here just takes the job off the open job list. If I choose to open a job back up, it can close by itself again based on criteria that the accounting department sets, and it can auto close. But a sales guy would never get in here and close a job by himself. He may open one, but he would never close one. The customer primary purchase order number, so they give you a number, you put that number in, and it's for $150,000. And then it gives me a place to estimate what I think the cost is going to be on this purchase order. So I'm thinking it's going to be around 20%, so let's just say it's going to be about 140. So obviously I'm going to use a little bit better calculations on that. I'll know what I quoted it at. I don't bring it in from the quote just because I don't want garbage in, garbage out, right? If that quote is wrong, I want to balance out what I bring in from that quote to what I said it was going to be. I can always go back and maintain this, but this number is a little more fluid than the top number, right? The top number is what my customer gave me for that PO number. Now, if I needed to add more purchase order numbers, I can go into the customer POs and add another purchase order number. Maybe it's 2233558889-01, right? And it's for another $1,000 at an $800 cost. And then this is maybe for some add-ons of whatever type or per billy, right? Whatever note we want to do to track what these purchase orders are that they give me. Now, a change order is a little bit different. A change order would assume I'm going to use that same purchase order number, but something changed on it, right? So I can go into this. I can put in that same number, 2233558889, tab, and you'll notice how it marks it as a change order automatically. I'm going to add another $500 to it at a $300 cost, and this is a change order per gym. And now you'll see at the bottom of the screen, it gives me my total amount, my total cost now. And then when I start releasing against that PO, it'll tell me how much I've released against it and then how much I have left. It allows me to do temporary purchase order numbers. So if for some reason I don't know what the purchase order number is right this minute, I can mark it as a temporary and go back and change it later and then update the ERP and update all the change orders, purchase orders at that point. The contacts came over from the quote itself. So if I didn't have the engineer when I was in the quote, I can add it here, or owner or contractor. And this actually creates the ship to and pulls it into SX and puts the owner in there and puts the general contractor automatically in there for me under the job tab. So let's go back to the header. So I've got this information in. I go down to the actual job address. So this is 125 West Street. Okay, this is Dallas, Texas, 32589. All right, so it gives me the ability to put in the street address. Now, it pulled over the taxing information based on my customer. I could change it here if I wanted to, or mark it as non-taxable and give it a reason and a certificate number. Again, that can be locked out by security if you don't want people changing that. We built a workflow to create a ship to, and then it will put the ship to on hold. It will notify the accounting person that this ship to was created. It will automatically fill in the $150,000 into the ship to, and then once the accounting person approves it or changes the amount or whatever they do to it, it then sends an email to the salesperson letting them know that the job's been approved and they can go ahead and start releasing against it. It'll still let them build the job. It'll let them pull in the quotes. It'll let them to do everything but release it to the ERP, which creates the purchase order and keeps it going. All right, so once I get that and I hit save, it goes out and creates a ship to in the ERP for ABC for ship to number 164301, which is the job number, and it names it Eatonville Building on the ship to. And again, if we have the ship to workflow turned on, it will do what I just described. Port in the quote, and I'm going to go to the quote and I'm going to type in 125, and it'll give me all my 125 jobs. Now this one is we're going to go ahead and bring in revision number 1, and it brings in all the lines, and it allows me to pick and choose what I want or don't want. Like if I didn't want this framing, I could turn it off and it'll uncheck all the items that are into it, and it won't come into the quote. Maybe later I win it and I can add it at any time. So I can continue to add lines as I go. So we'll go ahead and import these lines in. Now I could have made changes on those lines if I wanted to, but typically we bring it into the job and then we make the changes that we need to make. So if we need to, adjust some of the pricing or flush down some of the gross margins, we can do that at the job level. So this is my job, right? It basically just took that quote, it brought it in, and decided what I'm going to do with it. So far we haven't released any of it and we haven't billed any of it. But line by line, it'll tell me what we've released, when we released it, how much is remaining to release, Then we can actually see, what has actually been invoiced to the customer, what my gross margins are, and what my billed gross margins are here. So once we do that, now my accounting department told me that I was approved.
You can also create and manage releases with PJM, enable or disable third-party billing, manage job release pricing records, and split off of lines. Let's see how this works in the following demonstration. Click the Start Demo button on this page to watch the demo.
So we're going to actually create releases. So I'm going to go to this Release tab right here. And the release, if you think of a release as just being a sales order, right? So I'm going to create my first release. So releases can be done in phases. It creates a new sales order for each release. Now you may release them all on one. We've given you the flexibility to do either one. So we'll do a new release, and let's just say we're going to release, maybe just to keep it simple, we'll just release this first group. And notice that this should have all been turned on. When I hit that group, these lines should have automatically be checked. So you shouldn't have to do all this. And then uncheck the ones you don't want. All right, so we're going to release this all in one order. So we're going to release this group for this amount. Now, we don't necessarily want it. That's why it didn't come all over, because those actually are not hooked. You don't want to actually bring in the group because that would double up your sell price. All right, so we only want to bring in these items. So we're going to go ahead and award it. And then it goes through and asks me, where's it shipping to? It's always going to use this ship to number. It knows that it's Eatonville building, but it will allow me to override the street address with whatever ship to I pull in. An actual new ship to, because that's how it manages everything, is by ship to number. So if you needed to create a new ship to for this order, you would have to create a new job, but you can, right? You can have as many jobs as you want within that project. So I can run profitability by just that job, or run by multiple jobs within one project. Or I could physically, type in here what I want. Now, depending on what kind of security you give your salespeople on whether they can change these or not, typically we don't let them change that, but we could open it up if we needed to. Third-party billing allows me to bill somebody other than ABC Supply. So if I turn this on, I can now go in here and bill any one of my other customers. And what it would do is it actually would go out and create a ship to 164301 Eaton building for each one of these customers that I choose to do third-party billing. So this can come into play where you want to bill maybe the hospital instead of the contractor for whatever you're ordering. But you still want to give the contractor the credit for the job. All right, so I'm going to turn off third-party billing. And I'm going to hit, you can do shipping instructions, right? Blah, 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 blah. Ship it before here. Hit award. Now this is where it asks me, do I want to create a pricing record for this release? If I say yes, it will open up a box that says, as a default, I think I put in 90 days as the default, but the start date is today, and then it will end at whatever date that I put in here is how good this job is good for. So this will have the ship to ID and the customer that this pricing record belongs to. And if I needed to change, maybe I actually wanted this one to be a little longer, right? I can change the date here for this item. All right, so I'll go ahead and hit save, and it'll bring it over. It takes a little longer on this kind of stuff because it's actually going into the ERP, creating this stuff all with BODs and API calls. So it does take a couple seconds. Okay, so we do want to award the release. So there's the release. It came up with sales order number 2562-00. So in SX, you'll see these items that are out there. You'll ship them and bill them as normal. And when those things happen, you can actually This is for more direct ship stuff. If you wanted a manufacturer's order number, estimated ship date, carrier number, tracking number, that kind of stuff that you may want to plug into here as you get acknowledgments from your vendors, you can do that kind of thing and then run a report, or even run these as customer-facing reports with this kind of tracking information on them as you're going. So in just a few seconds, though, we should see, all right, so these were all put on hold. It did create a purchase order number for each one of these. So if I needed to print the purchase order number, I could print the purchase order number from here. Let me see, that should refresh too. Just to show you what it does, I can do some release notes. The header, if I needed to go back in and change it to a different purchase order number, I could. If I needed to change the ship to address on it, I could, and then update it. The acknowledgement print allows me to just print an acknowledgement and send it to my customer straight from here. Now keep in mind, I haven't even touched SX yet. So I don't even have to have an SX license to use PJM. So it pulls over. That allows you to do that kind of thing. And then purchase orders. I can make purchase order notes. So if I want the purchasing department to see an urgent note, it will do that for me. I could print purchase orders from here. If I had multiple purchase orders, it would pop up a screen and say, which purchase orders do I want to print? In this case, I only used one vendor, so I only see one purchase order. And it prints it out. And the nice thing about this, too, is these purchase orders that are coming out of my job system can be different than the ones coming out of the ERP. So if you want to put something on your job purchase orders that you don't necessarily want to put on your ERP, same thing with acknowledgments. Anything that we can print out of PJM, we can modify and change however we want. This is not the actual purchase order from the ERP, although it looks like it. So, once the billing happens, it writes it back to here. You can see that these items are now on a release and how much is on the release. So as they ship, it'll start, this actually should say ship quantity, ship cost, and then the billing is at the end. And it'll tell you what's remaining once it actually bills. So one of the nice things too is you can split off of lines. So if I wanted to actually split this 500 into 250, 250, I can go into the split and I can go find the one that I want to split, and then I'll change the split here to 250, and I'm going to just hit apply split. So it will deduct it out of the original 500 and add the 250, right? So it's 250, 250. And then all I have to do from here is hit the sales order update, and it'll update it and add that second line and fix the first line. You could actually send it to a new sales order. So if I've got, if we're doing linear feet and I want to split off, 150 linear feet off of that sales order to another sales order, I could do that and then see how much I have left. And it'll just keep deducting off of what I split. So it added to the PO, added to the sales order, and continues to go. So a lot of flexibility.